Hi, everybody. Thank you for being part of this today. First of all, thank you, PTSA, for putting on this panel presentation. I think it's going to be very helpful. Again, my name is Brian Dong. I'm one of 3 assistant principals here at Homestead. This is actually my 8th year as an administrator at the school. Prior to being an assistant principal here, I was one of the deans for 3 years. And prior to that, I was a math teacher at Monte Vista High School for 8 years as well. Believe it or not, I am also a product of this district. I graduated from Monte Vista back in 2000, and 5 years later, I came back to teach at the school. I was born and raised in Cupertino, been here my whole life, haven't gone anywhere. I still live locally. I see a lot of Homestead students on the weekends at Target and at various grocery stores, so it has sort of a small town feel for me. My main responsibilities here at the school right now are student activities, athletics, AP testing, technology, and the school master calendar. And so today I'm sort of here to help represent what we do from the sort of activity point of view, along with our athletic director, Cody Owens, and our teacher, ASB lead, Jessica Kirby. We, of course, are in remote learning, and a lot of things have been put on hold in regards to our side of the office. It's been fairly challenging to try and continue certain activities because we do believe that the co-curricular experience is what makes our students remember high school in some ways. It's where they find their niche. It's where they find balance. It's where they find friends and enjoyment. So we are trying all that we can to continue that in some virtual way and of course in accordance with the county health guidelines. Right now, if you are just inquiring about what's going on here at school, myself, as well as all the administrators and office staff, we still work on campus 8 to 4 every day. Right now, unfortunately, the campus is closed, so we can't have students here on campus for any reason. But we are in the process of looking at some ways in which we can involve kids in various conditioning groups, social groups, activity groups. But we're hope to share some of those ideas with you guys today, and I think those are maybe some of your questions that are involved along those lines. We certainly don't love being in this situation, and it's a challenge for everyone. And we thank you guys for being so accommodating and supporting the school. I was also the main point person for our book distribution in the first couple of weeks of school, which of course was in some ways a nightmare. It gave me nightmares. I think I've seen so many textbooks at the school that I don't want to, I dream about books, but it was a challenge. And again, I want to put out to the parents and families to thank you for the patience of getting the materials corrected for us. It was a lot. And so it's still ongoing and we're trying to do our best. But one thing I can say at this point is that everything that's been happening and what's going to happen the next few weeks continues to be let's figure it out day by day. Everything's changing constantly. We're always getting new information. So we appreciate your guys' patience and willingness to support our kids in any way, shape, or form.
Coach Owens, would you like to introduce yourself?
There we go, unmuted. My name is Cody Owens. This is my first year as athletic director at Homestead High School. Before this, I was at Monte Vista for 4 years as a teacher and a coach. And then before that, I was at Menlo Atherton High School for 1 year as a teacher and a football coach. And then I started in the district when I first moved up to the Bay Area in 2014 as a student teacher and also as a football coach. So I have 6 years of coaching experience. And then when the athletic director position opened up at Homestead High School, I decided that I wanted to kind of change roles a little bit. So I moved into it. Currently, I'm teaching 2 periods of 11th grade U.S. history, and then the rest of the day, I'm in charge of athletics along with Brian. So like Brian said, we're anxious but excited to get sports going again. We want to get kids out because, like Brian said also, I think a lot of kids really value co-curricular activities, and they're kind of what make high school memorable. So we're trying our best along with the district just to kind of get through this pandemic and get kids back and playing sports.
So maybe you could start with just telling us a little bit about what's going on with the athletics program now, and then we'll dive into the questions we collected.
Sure. So the most current thing that we're going to allow for as a district is what's called fall fitness and conditioning. That's going to start on September 14th. Not all sports have agreed to participate in it, so it's kind of up to the students to email the coaches of their prospective sports to see if they're going to be participating in fall fitness and conditioning. And that's going to run from September 14th, at least for initial 3-week period, but we're hoping basically through the rest of the first semester up until December. Sports are slated to start December 14th, with contests starting after December 28th. The seasons are a bit unique this year, so fall has been kind of pushed into this modified season 1 in the winter time. Winter sports have been pushed into this modified season 2, where they'll run through winter and some of spring, and then spring sports will be pushed into a season 3. So we're gonna see some condensed seasons. There's going to be some logistical challenges with that. We don't really have practice times officially set per sport. We are going to be limited by field space, so we'll need some leniency with practice time and which sports can practice, etc. So some things are still up in the air. The district is still trying to figure things out. The CCS is still trying to figure things out as far as competition goes. But that's about as much information as we have currently. Brian, do you have anything you think you can add on top of that?
The big piece with that then is the conditioning that Cody mentioned, but we also want to make sure that if your students are interested in sports, interested in joining a team, hopefully if we can make this happen in December, even though your coach may not be doing the fall conditioning, they decided not to participate in that, we're still encouraging students to at least register. So going through the athletic registration process, it's on our website. It's just a simple 3-step process. So that should your team in sports kick off in December as scheduled, you'll be ready to go. You would have the physical done, you would have the athletic clearance registration filled out, and then you would have already done the concussion test. So just having those out of the way, it can still be done. We're encouraging kids to do it, and hopefully by the time the season rolls around that you'll be ready to go.
And yeah, on top of that too, the district is, as a policy, going to be a little bit less lenient with physicals than they have been in the past, because we have so many months to kind of get some of the clearances out of the way before the December start date. So just something to keep in mind kind of moving forward.
Well, thank you so much. We have some questions from families. So Vicky, can you start with the athletics questions? Some of the athletics questions?
Sure. Cody or Brian, how do freshmen or students who weren't involved in athletics before show interest in trying out for a team? And how can they get information on tryouts and preconditioning? What are the protocols to keep them safe?
So the easiest way to get interest right now for trying out would be to email the coach of the sport they're most interested in. Some sports we do have vacancies in right now, so we're still trying to fill for coaches, but to go to the athletics website and directly email the coaches of the sports that they're most interested in, it would probably be the easiest way to contact. As far as protocols go for sports, we're still developing those as the seasons go on, but for fall fitness and conditioning, we have a bunch of protocols in place for student safety. For instance, students have to remain 6 feet apart at all times. They can only work out in pods of 12 students with one coach, and they have to remain in those same pods for a 3-week duration. Each pod has to be 25 feet apart. They're not allowed to reuse equipment and touch equipment constantly. They have to wear a mask when they come to school and when they leave school. And additionally, the district is trying to develop some sort of COVID test before the students actually end up participating in the fall conditioning. So some sort of temperature checks or something along those lines. So those are a bunch of the precautions already in place. Also, there's going to be limited access to where they can go on campus, limited, access to locker rooms, facilities, et cetera, to try to limit the spread of COVID.
Yeah, it's those conditioning practices are all outdoors only. There's no indoor usage at all.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask another athletics one. You answered this partially, but maybe just go through it step by step. Are there already forms and conditioning info that students need to complete, and what are the deadlines?
So September 14th is our start date. So the district is pushing out a K-12 form, like a waiver that the students have to have in order to participate in the fall fitness and conditioning. Again, that's kind of contingent though by sport. So really they only need to fill it out if their coaches are actively participating in fall fitness and conditioning, right? So like football for sure is participating, basketball is going to be participating. We have some other interested sports, but we haven't gotten enough information back on whether or not they're willing to practice or not. So for like instance, Brian said that indoor facilities aren't able to be used. So like volleyball, for instance, isn't very interested in practicing unless they have access to nets and indoor facilities, but that's not allowed at this time.
Okay, thank you. When will the tentative game schedules be released by SCVAL for the upcoming seasons? Is it possible that tournaments and games will happen during the holiday break?
So league schedules have already been set for season 1. We have those out. We're going to start working on publishing those. Preseason schedules haven't been set yet. We have a couple seasons that are set. Football's is set already. Basketball's attempting to set theirs. So preseason schedules are being worked out, but league schedules are set. There will be games and practices during the holiday break as of right now. So we can expect that. And there's going to be games and practices probably through the other breaks as well, through Presidents, and in the spring break as well. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over now to Sejal, and she's going to ask some questions regarding clubs.
Okay, this is Sejal, and I think this is probably directed to Mr. Dong.
Sure.
How will clubs be operating this school year in terms of meetings, and will there be or conferences, and is there a possibility of in-person activities?
Right, so to answer your first question, clubs remain we've been using the phrase on hold, but not exactly in that. Active ASB clubs, so clubs that may have been continuing from last year that are ASB sponsored, they can have virtual club meetings as long as their advisor is part of those meetings and agrees to be part of that scheduled time. Unfortunately, the advisors were sort of suggesting that they do those meetings during those Wednesday tutorial periods, so from like the 2 o'clock hour on. And in order for it to be considered a school-sponsored activity, we have told advisors that they need to be present in those meetings. So to supervise, to moderate, to facilitate, they need to agree to being part of those meetings. For instance, robotics is a big club, and besides having virtual club meetings, they would like to work on their robot, right? They'd like to build together. They like to get together as a group to do their activity as described in their club. But as of right now, they're not allowed on campus. So they're not allowed to come and be part of doing like activity that ties in with their clubs. Cody had mentioned the pods of 12. So we actually are trying to extend that pod idea to some of our bigger club groups. So for instance, the band will be being invited to do pods of 12 students. They're going to be doing it once a week. It's just similar to what the athletic practices are going to be like, individuals, socially distanced, one coach per 12, in that way to continue some of their activities. But the one thing we're running into is that it's a bit challenge for our staff right now to continue advising many of the clubs. I've received emails from a lot of our teachers saying that it's been challenging to continue advising, and the big piece of that is if they choose not to advise anymore, the club cannot function as a school-sponsored group until they find a new advisor, because we have to have the certificated teacher as the supervision and advisor.
Okay. Before I ask the next question, I think Mrs. Kirby joined the meeting just now. So I was just wondering if you wanted to do an introduction about yourself, Mrs. Kirby.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I'm late. I was in class. I'm Jessica Kirby. I'm the Activities Director at Homestead. I'm also a resource teacher. So it's nice to meet you.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so my next question about clubs is how students and parents can learn more about the different clubs and when their first meetings might be and when and how to join the meeting. And just one additional comment, I know some of the clubs may have already met this past week. So I know some of their club videos told you how to join their first meeting, but maybe didn't give information about their next meeting. So just curious about that.
Jessica, you want to answer that?
Sure. We just rolled out our new Homestead ASB website, and that's going to be kind of the core place to find all that information. We have a club commissioner and our VP work together, and we're working on creating a spreadsheet that includes the Zoom link for the meetings, along with any social media handles that they have, and how to access that. Because obviously we want students to be able to access that at any time if they want to hop in a club meeting. So that's going to be the main location. In addition to that, that spreadsheet will probably also be added to our Homestead website under the ASB section under clubs. It's a work in progress right now, but with the as far as right now, I'm not sure if I'm totally answering your question. The Homestead ASB website is going to be the core place to be visiting just to get all that information.
Okay, thank you. I think you answered that just fine.
You're welcome, sorry.
Okay, and then this sort of goes back to a little bit to what Mr. Dong mentioned about the advisor needing to be part of the meeting for it to sort of be school sanctioned. With Wednesday being pretty much the primary club time, if a student's interested in more than one club that's meeting at the same time, how would you advise that they check both of them out? And is there a limit for the number of clubs a student can join?
There is no limit for a number of clubs for a student to join. In a non-COVID situation, we would always sort of advise kids to be part of clubs that they're actually passionate about and not just to sign up for as many just for the sake of being and saying that they're in a lot of clubs. We also can ask kids to sort of manage their time and to be aware of when they can commit to certain things. In a non-COVID situation, most club meetings do occur during lunchtime anyways, and so if a student is in multiple clubs and they happen to overlap, it's on them to either communicate with the club for not attending a certain one and to making that schedule work for them. In this similar situation, we've told clubs that it's best to do club meetings from 2 to 3 o'clock during that tutorial Wednesday time. But again, it's really up to the officers and the advisor to find a common time and a workable time for everyone. So if they decide on an after school, early evening type of meeting, then as long as the advisor is there, they can let students know to attend that meeting at that time.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it back to Vicki now.
So Joe, these are again athletic focused questions. With the intended condensed seasons, what if a student plays a fall and winter sport or a winter and spring sport? Will they be able to play both, or will the seasons completely overlap?
Students are allowed to play both sports right now. So CCS kind of lifted that previous rule that a student could only play like one fall sport at a time, one winter sport at a time, one spring sport at a time. So, I mean, they could play a fall and a winter sport as long as they overlap. It's just kind of up to the coaches and the student to work out how it's going to look. So.
And I would just follow on from that, having some experience. Some coaches want their students to practice every day. So are the coaches aware that a kid can play 2 sports, or they'll be open to that, or that's up to them?
No, I mean, they have to be lenient within it. So they have to allow for some leniency. And we're going to do our best too to stagger practice times so that when we know we have a lot of multi-sport athletes, we're going to try to encourage staggering of practice time so they don't interfere as much, and also shortening kind of some of the practice times as well. So,
okay, thank you. How will athletic credits be granted? And if the athletes don't happen to be able to play this year, how do they then get PE credit?
I can answer that one. So we, at this point, the district is still under the idea that sports will happen, and so athletes that will participate in a season of some sort will still get their PE credits. Right now, the scheduling side of our world has prioritized seniors. So seniors who are relying on PE credit through athletics, if for some reason their season was not if the season is to be canceled, they're actually enrolled in PE already to make sure that they get the graduation PE credit. So that situation has been evaluated at this point so that seniors have priorities for the PE credit that they might need towards graduation if the season should be canceled in December or January.
Okay, thank you. What will a student see on a transcript, and why did it seem to be different for spring 2020 than previous semesters? An example is, quotation, "My son got on the varsity baseball team as a sophomore, practiced for weeks, started the season, but received PE credit and no acknowledgement that he obtained a place on the varsity baseball team."
As far as transcript rotation, I don't know the answer to that. That one you'd have to contact the guidance office. That is more of a guidance transcript question. I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Handing back to you, Sejal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I guess this is for either Mrs. Kirby or Mr. Dong about clubs. Do you have to join a club at the beginning of the school year, or are you able to join at any time? And actually, I'm going to combine it with another question that was put in that we received, which is which clubs have prerequisites or applications to join?
I can answer that. So you can join a club at any point in the year. There are only a couple clubs on campus. I know, I think I'm going to have to double check, so don't quote me. And maybe Mr. Dong can correct me, but I think it's the National Honor Society. You have to be a 10th, 11th, or 12th grader. You can't be a 9th grader to join that club, from what I understand. And then I'm not sure if FBLA you can join in the middle of the year, but I don't think that they're opposed to having new people come in. But in reality, everyone should be able to join a club. I think there are only a couple clubs on campus with that restriction or those parameters. And then what was the other question? Sorry.
Well, if there was an application to join. So you were saying that there are certain clubs that you need to be a certain grade level, but do any of the clubs have applications, or is there a selection process involved?
No, the only selection process that would be applied would be if someone were like wanting to become an officer for the club, they'd have to go through the election process, but otherwise that's as much paperwork as people have to do. I know certain clubs are, you can, like Key Club, you can pay for the international fee and then you get to be in that club, but you're still part of Key Club with or without the payment that you're making.
Okay, so if a student is interested in a club and they fill out the paperwork and they're the right grade level for most of the clubs, then they are accepted. They can be a full-fledged member. Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, if you sign up for a club, what's the commitment? Like, do you have to are you committed to joining the club, or can you just drop off? Are there any rules about that?
I think it depends on the club. I know that, for example, FBLA is one of our biggest clubs on campus, and they expect their core members to be participants and compete in things. And I think it just really depends, but I would imagine that most clubs want their members to continue attending, but I don't think that it is a hard and fast rule. I think, if you want to be a part of a club and you go one day and you don't go to the next meeting and you go to the following, I think that's fine. Obviously, if you're someone who's looking to put that on your resume for college, I'd hope that they're doing it because they were truly involved, but there's no hard and fast rules. Students should be able to show up to any club meeting and be included. So.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have has already actually been answered, so I'm not going to ask that, but I'm going to ask something different, which is, I know from my students, my children's experiences, that certain clubs have maybe some minimum volunteering or attending meeting requirements. They give you sort of points for those. And given that we're trying to concentrate a lot of the club activity time on a certain day, are the clubs being asked to have some flexibility with that? Because I know to be sort of in good standing with some of the clubs, you have to do a certain amount of stuff with them.
I think the club that comes to mind is the National Honor Society Club, because they do a lot of volunteer work. I can't answer that question right now in terms of a minimum commitment, but I don't totally have an answer for you right now. I'll have to get back to you. I don't know if Mr. Dong wants to add to that.
I think Sage, your question just essentially involves that the commitment piece. And each club, when you sign up to be a member, you are a member of that club. But we do allow clubs to say that if you're going to be a member, consider an active member of club, you need to participate in 2 activities, or you need to maintain the minimum 3.0 GPA, or whatever the requirements for like some of these nationally recognized organizations are. But that is a way for certain clubs to, in some ways, filter kids that really want to be there or not, right? Requiring them to attend the meetings, to be committed to coming to the activities that they sign up for, and showing interest in being an active member is a real basic thing for many of the clubs here on campus.
Okay, thank you. And I think you made a reference earlier that if there's a problem with it, they should just talk to the club officers if there's a conflict to work something out. So, okay, thank you. I'm going to pass off to Vicki now.
This question is probably directed to Coach Cody. How will postponing athletic activities, if that continues to happen throughout the year, affect students who hope to be recruited?
We don't have an answer for that right now. That's a big concern for everyone. We don't know what to do if we just have to postpone it. Colleges aren't playing this fall. A lot of colleges aren't playing, so recruitment is kind of on a hold. But yeah, we don't have a good answer for what to do about kids who aren't getting to play, especially seniors who aren't getting to play.
Okay, thank you. And this is a related question. Homestead Athletics Department historically doesn't really seem to help guide athletes at all in the college placements. Is this something that the department would consider in the future?
Yeah. Obviously we want kids to get recruited and do well from our school because it gives it a good reputation. So yeah, we're looking at making some changes throughout athletics and the athletics department kind of over this year and next year. That'll be more beneficial for students. So, but right now we're just trying to get around this COVID situation and trying to get sports happening. So yeah, it's hectic.
And I have a question that's come in since the meeting has started, and I'm not sure that it can be answered yet, given previous answers, but how often will conditioning be, when, how long? I presume you will just direct people to the coach of a particular sport.
So right now we're looking at like a 4 to 6 period. I'm right on that, right, Brian? Kind of 4 to 6.
Yeah. So right now the coaches who are electing to participate in the fall conditioning are allowed to sign up on a sheet. And the time slots that we've allocated are from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So it's technically after school. And they're allowed to have up to 5 practices, so 10 hours per week. Right now, the only sports teams that have signed up look like it's football, and they're going to go Monday through Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. in pods of 12. Our basketball coach has expressed interest as well, but it doesn't look like they've signed up just yet. But those are the only 2 sports that have shown interest for that. So you're looking at potentially 8 hours a week, 2-hour practice, 4 to 6 p.m.
I see some other questions in the chat. Just to kind of reiterate, we opened it up to. It's opened up to all sports technically. It's just dependent on what coaches want to do. and gauging from athletes' interests. So it's not just from season one coaches can participate in the fall fitness, it's all sports can participate in fall fitness and conditioning. But we've gotten not very much interest just because of the situation limitations on it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand back to say Joel, and then we are keeping track of the chat questions. So I will then ask the follow-on athletic ones after say Joel asks her question now.
Okay, thank you. So this could be either Mr. Dong or Mrs. Kirby. One of the questions we got was, my student is new and shy and is not comfortable with joining an open Zoom. How can I encourage my student, or is there a way to ask officers to connect with my student to have them feel comfortable and to sort of welcome them?
So I'll start this one. I don't know if Brian has something to add, but I think it's really hard, obviously, because they're not walking into a classroom. But I would recommend that if a student is feeling shy, to encourage them to email the class officers and just kind of maybe ask what a club is like and what to expect at a meeting. Obviously, if a student ever wants to reach out to me, and I'm happy to reach out to that student, to reach out to whoever would like to join the club, but I'm not sure if there's like a perfect solution, but they can always hop on, and if they're uncomfortable, they can hop out. They're not required to show their camera. I know clubs are working really hard to make sure that they're recruiting new members. So I'm sure clubs will be doing a lot of icebreakers and things to get people on board. But that would be my recommendation, is just encouraging students to email the class officers, or I'm sorry, not the class officers, officers. But yeah, Brian, do you have any advice in that?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely challenging being really fully integrated in a Zoom setting. But I would start with what Ms. Kirby did as well. Reaching out through email is probably the safest at this point, the less personal way of doing it. And it's probably the first step that we could take.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my next question is, you've both touched on it a little bit, but what's the best way to keep current with club events? Is it through, once you've joined, is it through Facebook? Is it through their Instagram account? Is it through their website? I think it kind of varies by club. So when you do sort of the spreadsheet that you're going to update, is that going to be like a column where maybe, because I also know sometimes club officers change from spring to fall. And so I don't know if there's always a smooth transition with email accounts as well. So
the dream, the dream is that one of those columns will include the point of like reference for where they should go. I know most students are using Instagram, so included in that next to the Zoom link would in addition be like the Instagram username, and if they use Facebook, what that contact looks like. So that's what we're hoping. I mean, things can change, but from what I see, at least when I scroll my feed, a lot of students are using Instagram at this point. But that's the goal, is that we're able to kind of maintain that communication so that any student can access that information.
Hey, Joel, I believe you're muted. You muted yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry about that. The next question is through the chat, and we've touched on it a little bit, but I'll ask it again in case there's a different answer, I guess. How will clubs that require community volunteering work like CSF do that this year? Will the school find opportunities, or will it be waived? I think that's usually the club that does that, not the school, but do you know if those volunteering requirements will be waived, or is that up to the club to decide how to handle that?
It really depends on the club itself, because many of our volunteer clubs are tied to national organizations like Rotary or Interact and those sorts of things. So they may have volunteer requirements that somehow can be met in these COVID times, but I would imagine that those would be somewhat flexible this year. As far as like other clubs wanting to do volunteer work or an activity or an event, if they're not tied to any sort of national organization, they're just a club here on campus. At this time, we've told them to sort of hold off on events or any sort of inviting kids to go to certain things that involve person-to-person contact. Since we're not having kids at school for any reason, then there's no reason for us to have co-curriculars that would put other students at risk. And so we've decided just to hold off, and you will still remain an active member and an active club as long as you continue to communicate with your advisor and you decide to have a Zoom meeting or some sort of virtual connection. But as far as like encouraging the students to go seek out person-to-person contact, we have told folks to hold off on all that.
Okay, Vicki, I think I'm going to just ask this one last question because most of the rest of the questions are on athletics, if that's okay. So I guess we sort of jumped into all of this and didn't maybe review this part of it. Parents are asking on the chat how freshmen can join clubs. So I guess maybe we glossed over that. So I'll just give either Mr. Dong or Mrs. Kirby an opportunity to answer that really quickly.
Sorry. So right now with the digital club fair, next week's going to be, we're going to be focusing a lot on clubs. And so I would really encourage, we're advertising this in a myriad of ways for our digital club fair. And so the videos will give a snapshot of how to join the club. And next Thursday at 6 p.m. we'll be advertising a webinar that our leadership students are going to be holding. It's going to be 30 minutes and they're going to be going over why clubs are important. They're going to be going over the types of clubs we have on campus, just the benefits of joining a club, and all of the above. So it's going to be all about clubs. Parents and students are invited. So I hope that answers your question, but we are doing our best to try and advertise it in as many places as possible.
Okay, I'll take over again now. We have some more athletic questions in the chat. With the increased leniency with the compressed seasons, will students be allowed to play club and school sport at the same time?
I'm not particularly sure what the regulation on that is, because I believe I believe that's always been the case in the past, is that people can play club and school sport. That's just at the discretion of the club and the high school kind of coach, right? So if like the student can make all the high school practices and make the club practices, I think that hasn't been an issue in the past. So I haven't heard anything about it, but I know it hasn't been a past issue. So I haven't heard anything though.
Okay. I do think some coaches don't want you to play both, or don't want you to do both.
Yeah, that usually comes from the club and more than it does like our coaches. But yeah, it's most of the time there's a disagreement in coaches amongst practice times.
Okay. Tennis doesn't appear to have any information on the website. Can you provide any?
I mean, the tennis could participate in fall fitness and conditioning, but obviously it's restricted. So it's like nobody can share equipment or balls or anything like that. So we haven't gotten any interest from tennis. The tennis season will start, I believe, in season 3. But I'll have to double check. But I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah, I think a point of clarity for the fall conditioning piece is that if you're in a pod of 12, and let's say it's a basketball pod of 12, right? The assumption is that, well, we could all just be shooting basketballs and just practicing our shooting, but we just stay socially distanced and then rebound balls that kind of come back to us. The regulation is that the equipment, for instance, cannot be shared. So a student cannot shoot a basketball and then grab another basketball that came close to them. They have to stick with their own equipment. So that falls the same for tennis. Hitting a ball back and forth is a shared ball between 2 to 4 people. So I want to make sure that it's clear that it's the emphasis on the title, which is conditioning. So it's not it's non-contact, non-shared of any sort of equipment, but physical fitness is the conditioning idea piece there. It's not necessarily a organized traditional basketball, football, tennis practice. It is strictly individual conditioning.
Okay, thank you. So if the sport, this is clarifying something that you said before, Brian. So if the sport is cancelled, only seniors will be able to get remedial PE credit. What about juniors and sophomores who may have won a place on the team before or were on the team before?
That's something that the district has to decide on what we're going to do with that, because the assumption is if they're a junior and their season was canceled and they wanted to get that, they wanted that sport for PE credit, the assumption is that they could then play that sport as a senior and they would fulfill that PE credit at that point. If the student decides, well, after junior year, I'm not going to play baseball anymore, but I still need PE credits, then as a senior, they would take PE. And I don't know, though, that if, let's say, in January, let's say all sports are canceled, right? And January is the technical start time for our second semester, that if a student is told, if a junior or a sophomore is told, well, your baseball season's now canceled, what do you want to do? I don't know if there will be an option for that student to say, well, to start a second semester, I'd like to sign up for PE to fulfill my PE credit for second semester. Those details have not been worked out, and that would have to come from the district as well as from our guidance department on how that would be figured out. But because we're hopeful that the sports season will continue, we're still just kind of playing along those lines for right now.
And I guess the other scenario of that is if a season starts, like in fact they did this spring, and then stop halfway through.
Yeah, so it goes back to that question that you asked me earlier about the student that was in baseball, right? The baseball season was basically in mid-swing at that point, and it was canceled. The student should get PE credit for all that was done leading up to it. And so clarity on which is what is written on the transcript should come from the guidance office in that way.
Okay, thank you.
But they are aware of it. The district that's a big thing for them, is that they want to make sure that they get the credits in some way and our students graduated in all areas.
Yeah, I think that particular question was more the student wanted credit for being on the varsity team as a sophomore, not just get PE credits.
Yeah, I mean, it would look different on the transcript to say like team baseball as a sophomore versus just PE. I understand that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Should everyone do registration and forms now for all seasons of sports? Not sure if this was already answered. So should you only be signing up for spring sports now?
Right now, we only have season 1 opened up for registration for student athletes, but we're going to extend to season 2 and season 3 shortly and as the months go on. So we'll open up like season 2 by October, and then season 3 by November. So we're kind of doing it in chunks to keep it manageable for registering them.
And this is just me asking a question now. Is there any information available on the concussion testing? Normally that's run by the school at the school.
Yeah, we created a slides presentation share on the website that has additional information on the concussion testing, but basically there's a form that parents and students have to sign. It's a K-12 form stating that the parents can observe the student do the concussion testing at home and proctor it at home. And then we get the concussion test online that they passed it or not. So parents have to proctor at home, and they have to sign a kind of like a permission slip saying that they did that.
Okay, thank you. That concludes all the questions that I can see on the chat right now. I think Sejal may have one more.
Okay, I'm not sure what the question is. I think the question is, how can we get information on the club's webinar? But I don't know if they're referring to this or something else. So
I'm gonna assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, about the day I mentioned next Thursday at 6 p.m. That is the date and time. I don't have the webinar information, but I will get that out. And I'll also send Maya that information so she can disseminate it as well.
Okay, and the kids will get that through an email link through their school email?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
There is another question that's popped up in the athletics. Can a student in a sport that is not electing to have conditioning join the conditioning of another sport?
Right now, we're leaving that up to discretion of coaches because it's completely voluntary, right? So, I mean, from the coach's standpoint, it's voluntary. They have to limit their pod size as well. So it's limited by the number of coaches that they have. So, yeah, we're leaving that up to the discretion of the coaches because they're doing it voluntary. They're not being paid a stipend, and they're also having to risk kind of managing the, COVID situation on their own. So.
A question that's just come to my mind is, does the pod limitation mean that most of the cut team sports will be cut at 12? For example, something like baseball that normally goes up to 20 or 18 or whatever.
Well, as of now, I mean, that's not a big concern just because like the pod limitation, we don't have, like, baseball's not practicing in the fall fitness and conditioning. So if we do have sports, that pod limitation is going to lift, right? Otherwise, we're not really going to be able to have sports. So baseball will be able to resume their normal number. The football team will still carry, 45 players, et cetera. So the pods and the fitness, right now it's all voluntary. So really it can't impact the athletes once the seasons come around, and the coaches can elect whether or not to have it. And kind of like Brian said before, it's not so much sport specific because it can't be, because we can't use the equipment. So it's really just like a way to get kids in shape through, aerobic activity.
Yep. One more question has popped in. Is basketball conditioning for boys or girls or both?
Right now, girls haven't shown interest in it, and we've shown some interest from boys basketball, but we're not entirely sure if they're going to follow through. So again, all the conditioning's at the coach's discretion, and it's kind of by sport, and we haven't received a tremendous amount of interest through coaches, and we asked the coaches to gauge player interest and go from there. So but we haven't received a lot of interest in fall fitness and conditioning outside of really football, which is kind of to be expected because, like, in all honesty, from years of coaching, most other sports don't have a tremendous amount of off-season competition. Like football always practices in spring and then all through way through summer, and then they go into the fall. And basketball has a lot of off-season practice, but like baseball rarely does unless the students really play clubs. So we were kind of expecting that moving into this.
Is there a plan for a follow-up athletics meeting?
You need to clarify the question.
That's all I have. I'm sorry. Maybe Maya can clarify it.
It's a question from the chat. I believe that it was Xenia. Jenny, do you want to explain yourself?
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to know if we're going to have another meeting just to understand how sports are going to fall through.
I would say from the school standpoint, absolutely.
From the school, yes.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Once we get a better idea if the seasons will actually happen. I mean, another thing to consider is that if we're still in remote learning in January, but sports are allowed to continue, will students be allowed to watch the games? Will teams be competing indoors or outdoors only? Will they only be allowed to be with the players? And will parents be allowed to come watch? There's a lot of factors that still play into this that go beyond just having the contest or not. For instance, Cody and I have been talking about football. So if football happens and our football team needs to travel to Burlingame High School or somewhere far away, what will the restrictions be for the bus? Can we have we likely won't be able to have 50 players sitting on one bus close to each other like they normally would do. Would that mean we need 5 buses? Would that mean parents driving them there? And then if parents have to drive their players there and they're not allowed inside the game, like do they have to stand outside and wait for the game to be over? So there are a lot of planning logistics out there that we still don't know about. Like I said, it goes beyond whether they're just going to have the contest or not.
Okay, thank you. I think that wraps up all the questions we have. So I would like to hand back to Maya to wrap up the meeting.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here with us today. I think I have learned a lot about the clubs and athletics, and I hope you all did. We will ask Ms. Kirby to give us the link to the webinar and the location for the spreadsheet for all the clubs. So we'll get kind of a condensed email information that we can share with parents, because the ASB works mainly with the students. So we can try and give you some shadow system so you can support your students. We want to respect everybody's time, so we are wrapping up right on time. Thank you to our 2 moderators, Sejal and Vicky. They're both also mentors on our mentorship program, and a lot of the questions that came up today were questions that they got from their freshman families that they're working with. So it was important for us to do this event. Thank you, Mr. Dong, Mr. Owens, and Ms. Kirby for being with us. And we want to thank you for all the work you're doing with our students. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'm going to stop the recording.